They called her the most desired woman in werewolf society. Beautiful, brilliant, born into one of the most powerful families in existence. Ralia Tran had everything until the man she married decided to take it all away. For 3 years, she disappeared from the world that once celebrated her, hidden behind closed doors where bruises could be covered and screams could be silenced. But tonight, at the grand convergence where werewolf royalty gathered, Ralia made a choice: escape or die trying. She crawled under a table, hiding like a hunted animal, praying her husband wouldn't find her in the chaos. But someone else did. Someone far more dangerous than any husband. The Alpha King himself, Cale Stormridge, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness was matched only by his absolute power. She expected exposure, punishment, to be dragged back to her nightmare. Instead, he knelt beside her in the shadows, looked into her terrified eyes, and said 4 words that changed everything. "You're safe with me." This is the story of how the most desired lady in werewolf society crawled under a table to escape hell and found a king who would burn the world down to keep her safe. If you want to know what happens when an Alpha King breaks every rule to protect a stranger, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story goes places you won't believe. Ralia's journey from that table to reclaiming her throne, it's about to get intense. Don't miss a single moment. Subscribe, and let's dive in. Picture this: the Grand Hall of the Northern Territory, draped in silk and shadow, filled with the most powerful werewolves in existence. This isn't just a party, it's the annual pack convergence, where alliances are forged, territories are negotiated, and one wrong move can start a war. Rain hammers against the massive windows, thunder rolls through the mountains, and inside, beneath crystal chandeliers and behind political smiles, everyone is watching everyone else, calculating advantage, measuring threat. This is where Ralia Tran finds herself tonight, not as the celebrated socialite she once was, but as a desperate woman making the most dangerous gamble of her life. 3 years ago, she was the woman everyone wanted to be or be with. Tonight, she's crawling under a banquet table, her designer dress torn, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the shadow of a bruise on her jaw. Her husband, Damian Cross, is somewhere in this crowd, charming, powerful, respected, and absolutely lethal when someone defies him. Ralia has tried to leave before. The consequences taught her that escape was impossible, but tonight, something broke inside her. Maybe it was his threat about what would happen when they got home. Maybe it was the way he smiled at another pack leader while his fingers dug bruises into her wrist. Or maybe it was simply that she realized she'd rather die trying to escape than spend one more night in that house. So she hid, under a table, in the shadows, listening to footsteps and laughter above her, praying to gods she'd stopped believing in, that she could just disappear. That's when she heard different footsteps, measured, purposeful, coming directly toward her hiding spot. And when Ralia looked up, she found herself staring into the silver-gray eyes of Cale Stormridge, the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf in existence, a man whose word could reshape territories and whose displeasure could destroy packs. She expected him to call for security, to demand her removal, to summon Damian. Instead, he did something no one would have predicted. He knelt in his $1,000 suit on the dirty floor, brought himself to her eye level, and spoke with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd heard about the Ice King. "I'm not going to hurt you. And I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you either. Do you understand?" Ralia didn't understand. She couldn't understand. Why would the Alpha King care about a broken woman hiding under a table? But as his hand extended toward her, not grabbing, just offering, she made a choice that would change both their lives forever. She took it. This is the story of what happened next. The Grand Hall of the Northern Territory had never looked more beautiful or more terrifying. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across silk-draped walls, while rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows like desperate fists. Thunder rolled through the mountains, and inside, werewolf royalty from every major pack gathered for the annual convergence, a night of politics wrapped in the pretense of celebration. Ralia Tran stood at the edge of the ballroom, her champagne untouched, her designer dress feeling more like a costume than clothing. 3 years ago, she would have owned a room like this. 3 years ago, people called her the most desired woman in werewolf society. Beautiful, brilliant, born into one of the most powerful families in existence. 3 years ago, she'd made the worst decision of her life and married Damian Cross. His fingers dug into her wrist now, hidden beneath the fall of her shawl where no one could see the bruises forming. To everyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. Damian, charming and handsome in his tailored suit, laughing with a pack leader from the Eastern Territory. Ralia, poised and elegant, smiling at all the right moments. No one could see her dying inside. "We're leaving in 10 minutes, Damien murmured against her ear, his voice carrying the edge that made her stomach twist with dread. "And when we get home, we're going to have a conversation about that designer you were talking to earlier, the one who couldn't stop staring at you." Ralia's breath caught. She'd only been discussing fabric suppliers, a professional conversation. But Damien didn't see professional conversations, he saw threats, challenges, reasons to remind her who she belonged to. "I wasn't," she started. His grip tightened, and she bit back a gasp of pain. 10 minutes, Ralia. Don't embarrass me by making me come find you." He released her wrist and walked away, already laughing with another political contact, his mask of charm perfectly restored. Ralia stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must hear it. 10 minutes. Then the car ride home where he'd berate her in cold, measured tones. Then the house where no one could hear. Then whatever punishment he'd decided she deserved for the crime of existing in public. Something inside Ralia cracked. Not broke, it had been breaking for 3 years. But something fundamental shifted, and she thought, "I can't do this anymore. I won't survive another night." The ballroom suddenly felt too bright, too crowded, too full of people who saw her and didn't see her at all. Ralia moved without conscious decision, weaving through clusters of chatting wolves, staying low, keeping to the edges where shadows gathered. Her pulse roared in her ears, drowning out the orchestra, the laughter, the thunder outside. She spotted it near the back wall, a long banquet table draped with fabric that pooled on the floor, creating a hidden space beneath. It was absurd, childish, but it was somewhere Damien wouldn't think to look, and Ralia was out of better options. She dropped to her knees, not caring that her dress tore slightly, and crawled beneath the table. The world became small and dark, and blessedly quiet. She pressed herself against the wall, drew her knees to her chest, and tried to remember how to breathe. This was it. This was her grand escape plan. Hiding under a table like a frightened animal. Hoping her husband wouldn't find her before what? She didn't know. She just knew she couldn't get in that car. Couldn't go back to that house. Couldn't spend one more night pretending she was still alive. Footsteps passed above her. Conversations floated like fragments of a world she no longer belonged to. How long had she been hiding? 5 minutes? 10? Had Damien started looking for her yet? Then she heard different footsteps, purposeful, measured, coming directly toward her hiding spot with the certainty of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Ralia pressed harder against the wall, making herself as small as possible. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. This was it. Damien had found her, and the punishment for hiding would be so much worse than... The fabric lifted, but it wasn't Damien crouching there. It was a man she'd only seen from a distance, a man whose reputation preceded him like winter wind. Cale Stormridge, the Alpha King. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her wedding dress, his dark hair pulled back to reveal a face carved from severity and command. His eyes were silver gray, sharp enough to cut, set in features that belonged to someone who'd never known fear. They called him the Ice King, said his heart was as cold as his strategic mind, that he'd never shown mercy to an enemy, or warmth to an ally, that crossing him meant death, and pleasing him meant temporary survival. Ralia expected him to demand she come out, to call for security, to summon Damien. Instead, Cale Stormridge did something that shattered everything she thought she knew about powerful men. He lowered himself to his knees on the ballroom floor in his $1,000 suit, bringing himself to her eye level, and his voice when he spoke carried a gentleness that contradicted every story she'd ever heard about him. "You're safe," he said simply. "I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you either. Do you understand?" Ralia stared at him, unable to process the words. This was the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf in existence. Why would he? How could he? He must have seen the confusion and terror warring in her expression because he continued, his voice steady and sure. "I saw him grab your wrist. I saw your face when he did. I know what fear looks like. And I know what it means." His silver eyes held hers without wavering. "So I'm asking you, do you need help?" The question broke something inside her. No one had asked her that in 3 years. No one had seen past Damien's charm to the nightmare underneath. No one had looked at her, really looked at her, and recognized the truth written in every flinch, every carefully controlled expression, every ghost of the woman she used to be. "Yes," Ralia whispered, and the word tasted like freedom and terror combined. "Please, Kale extended his hand through the shadows, not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. Palm up. A choice, not a command. Ralia looked at that hand for what felt like an eternity. Taking it meant stepping into the unknown. Meant trusting a stranger with a fearsome reputation. Meant crossing a line she could never uncross. But staying meant getting in Damien's car. Going back to that house. Surviving another night until she finally didn't. Ralia reached out and placed her trembling hand in Kale's steady one. His fingers closed around hers gently, securely. Nothing like the grip that left bruises. My second in command is waiting by the north exit. We're going to walk out of here together, nice and calm. Can you do that? Ralia nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. Kale helped her crawl out from under the table, his movements careful, giving her space to move at her own pace. When she stood on shaking legs, he positioned himself between her and the rest of the ballroom, blocking her from view. Stay close to me. And Ralia? He glanced back at her, something fierce burning behind that ice-cold exterior. You're not going back to him. Not tonight. Not ever. I promise you that. And somehow, standing in the shadow of the Alpha King, while thunder shook the windows, and her husband searched for her somewhere in the crowd, Ralia believed him. Kale moved through the ballroom like he owned it, which, technically, he did. The convergence was held on his territory, in his hall, under his authority. But Ralia had never seen power worn so casually, so absolutely. People parted without him asking. Conversations paused as he passed. Heads bowed in respect that bordered on reverence. And he used every bit of that power to shield her. Ralia walked in his shadow, her hand still tucked in his, feeling simultaneously exposed and invisible. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Any second now, Damien would spot them. Would call out. Would demand to know what the Alpha King was doing with his wife. Breathe, Kale murmured without turning around. You're holding your breath. Breathe. Ralia forced air into her lungs, forced her legs to keep moving. The north exit seemed impossibly far away. An escape route that belonged in dreams, not reality. She caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd, people who'd attended her wedding, who'd watched her disappear from society over the past 3 years, who'd probably noticed the weight loss and the way she stopped laughing but never asked why. They noticed the Alpha King holding her hand, though. She could see the speculation in their eyes, the questions forming. By tomorrow, this would be gossip currency. By next week, it would reach Damien's family. Good, something fierce whispered inside her. Let them all know. They were almost to the exit when Ralia heard it, Damien's voice cutting through the crowd, charming and smooth and deadly. Ralia, sweetheart, where did you go? She froze. Every instinct screamed at her to respond, to go to him, to apologize for disappearing and beg forgiveness before his punishment escalated. 3 years of conditioning didn't evaporate just because she was holding the Alpha King's hand. Kale felt her hesitation. He stopped walking and turned to face her fully, using his body to block Damien's line of sight. His silver eyes found hers with an intensity that demanded her attention. Look at me, not him. You're with me now. He doesn't get to call you back like a dog. Do you understand? He'll be so angry, Ralia whispered. Let him be angry. Kale's voice carried absolute conviction. His anger is not your responsibility. His feelings are not your burden. And his claim on you ends tonight. Before Ralia could process that statement, the north exit door opened, and a woman stepped through. She was tall and striking, with blonde hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that assessed everything in a single glance. She wore tactical clothing that suggested security, but she moved with the confidence of someone far more important than hired muscle. Liana, Kale said, and Ralia heard genuine warmth in his voice for the first time. This is Ralia. We need to move quickly. Liana's sharp eyes softened when they landed on Ralia, taking in the torn dress, the barely concealed bruise on her wrist, the terror written across her face. I've got a car waiting in the private garage. Service corridors are clear, I made sure of it. Good. Kale released Ralia's hand and gestured toward Liana. She's going to take you out. I need to stay here. Make sure your husband doesn't follow. Panic flared in Ralia's chest. You're not coming? I can't disappear from my own convergence without raising questions. Kale's expression gentled. But Liana is my second in command. You can trust her with your life. I do. Liana stepped forward, offering her hand the same way Kale had palm up. a choice. I promise I'll get you somewhere safe. And for what it's worth, I've been where you are. I know what it takes to run. You're incredibly brave. Something about Liana's words, the recognition in her eyes, made Ralia believe her. She took the offered hand. Go, Kale said. Then, softer, directed at Ralia. I'll come check on you once this circus ends. A few hours at most. Liana pulled Ralia through the north exit before she could respond, before she could second guess, before the weight of what she was doing could drag her back. The door closed behind them, muffling the ballroom noise, and suddenly they were in a plain service corridor that smelled of cleaning supplies and possibilities. This way. Liana moved quickly, but not so fast. Ralia couldn't keep up. How are you holding up? I don't know, Ralia answered honestly. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe why would the Alpha King help me? Because Kale's not who people think he is. Liana guided them down a stairwell, her hand steady on Ralia's elbow. Everyone sees the Ice King, the ruthless politician. They don't see the man who watched his mother die at his father's hands and swore he'd never let it happen to anyone else. The words hit Ralia like a physical blow. His mother was killed by her mate when Kale was 12. Abused for years, trapped by pack law and tradition, until one night it went too far. Liana's voice carried old pain. He found her. Couldn't save her. It's why he's so zealous about sanctuary law, so aggressive about protecting victims. It's personal for him. They reached the private garage empty except for a sleek black car and the sound of rain drumming on the roof. Liana opened the passenger door, waiting for Ralia to get in before circling to the driver's side. I didn't know, Ralia said as Liana started the engine. About his mother. Most people don't. He doesn't talk about it. Liana pulled out of the garage, into the rain-soaked night, away from the grand hall, where Damien was probably still searching. But that's why he noticed you. Why he acted so fast. He sees the signs. Ralia watched the fortress disappear in the side mirror, watched the life she'd been trapped in grow smaller and smaller. Where are we going? Kale's private residence. It's technically still in his territory but isolated, heavily secured. Nobody gets through without his explicit permission. Liana glanced at her. You'll have your own room, your own space. No one will touch you or even enter without consent. Kale's very serious about boundaries. I don't understand why he's doing this. Because you asked for help. And because he can. Liana navigated the winding mountain roads with practiced ease. Look. I know this is overwhelming. You're running on adrenaline right now. And when it wears off, you're going to crash hard. But I need you to know something. You're safe now. Actually safe. Not if I'm good enough safe. Not if I don't make him angry safe. Just safe. Ralia's vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. What if Damien comes after me? Then he'll have to go through an Alpha King to get to you. Liana's smile was sharp. And trust me, that's not a fight he'll win. They drove for another 20 minutes, climbing higher into the mountains until they reached a sprawling modern home that seemed to grow out of the landscape itself. Stone and glass and security that wasn't obvious but was definitely present. Liana parked in the attached garage and led Ralia inside. The house was beautiful in a way that made Ralia's chest ache. Warm lighting, comfortable furniture, artwork on the walls that suggested someone actually lived here, rather than just existed. Nothing like the cold showpiece she'd shared with Damien, where every surface was chosen for status rather than comfort. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. Liana grabbed a tablet from the kitchen counter. I'm keying your biometrics into the security system now. You'll have full access to the house, but no one else can enter without Kale's authorization or yours. There's food in the kitchen, clothes in your size. In the closet Kale had me prepare everything this afternoon. Ralia stared at her. This afternoon? But he only found me an hour ago. He saw your husband grab you during the reception line. Saw your face. Made the call to prepare a safe space just in case. Liana's expression softened. Like I said, he notices the signs. The full weight of it crashed over Ralia, then the escape, the drive, the impossible kindness of a man who'd prepared for her rescue before she even knew she needed it. Her legs gave out, and she would have collapsed if Liana hadn't caught her, guiding her to the nearby couch. It's okay, Liana murmured. You're okay. This is just the adrenaline wearing off. Breathe through it. Ralia tried, but the sobs came anyway. 3 years of held-back tears, of swallowed screams, of dying by inches in a marriage that was supposed to be her fairy tale. She cried into her hands while Liana sat beside her, Not touching but present. A solid reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. I ruined my dress, Ralia gasped between sobs, the observation absurd but somehow important. Good, Liana said firmly. That dress belongs to your old life. Tomorrow, we'll get you clothes that are actually yours. The kindness in those words broke something else inside Ralia. Some last, desperate grip on the person she'd been pretending to be. She wasn't Damien's perfect wife anymore. Wasn't the most desired lady playing a role at parties. Wasn't anything but a terrified woman who'd crawled under a table to escape and somehow ended up here, in a stranger's home, crying on a comfortable couch while rain pattered against windows. What happens now? She whispered when she could finally speak. Liana handed her a box of tissues. Now? You rest. You eat something if you can. You sleep in a locked room where no one will hurt you. And tomorrow, we figure out the next steps. She stood. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Kale should be here in a few hours. But Ralia? She waited until Ralia met her eyes. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. This is your space. Your choice. Always. After Liana left, Ralia sat in the quiet house, listening to the rain, feeling the absence of fear like a physical thing. For the first time in 3 years, she was alone without being afraid of what came next. She climbed the stairs slowly, found the room Liana had indicated, spacious, comfortable, with a lock on the inside of the door. The closet held clothes in her size, soft things that looked chosen for comfort rather than appearance. The attached bathroom had everything she might need. Ralia locked the bedroom door, then the bathroom door. She ran a hot shower and stood under the spray until her tears finally stopped, until the shaking in her hands eased, until she could breathe without feeling like the air was made of glass. When she finally crawled into the bed soft and clean and hers, Ralia waited for the fear to return, for Damien to burst through the door, for this to be revealed as a dream she'd wake from in her nightmare. But the fear didn't come. The door didn't open, and for the first time in 3 years, Ralia Tran fell asleep without terror. Sunlight woke Ralia, real sunlight, not the dim, filtered light that reached Damien's bedroom through heavy curtains he insisted on keeping drawn. She opened her eyes to unfamiliar surroundings and felt her heart seize with panic before memory caught up. The table, the Alpha King, Liana, the drive through rain-soaked mountains. She'd escaped. Ralia lay perfectly still, listening for signs of danger. Damien's footsteps, his voice, the particular quality of silence that meant he was angry. But the house remained quiet, except for distant sounds of someone moving in the kitchen below. The bedroom door was still locked from the inside. No one had tried to enter during the night. She checked her phone, 17 missed calls from Damien, 12 text messages that progressed from concerned to angry to threatening. The last one, sent at 3 a.m, simply read, "You're making this worse for yourself." Ralia's hands trembled as she deleted each message without reading them fully. Then she blocked his number, the action feeling simultaneously empowering and terrifying. 3 years of responding within seconds to avoid his displeasure, and now she was just ignoring him. A soft knock at the bedroom door made her jump. "Ralia, it's Liana. I've got breakfast if you're hungry, but no pressure. Take your time." The kindness in that simple statement, "take your time," made Ralia's throat tighten. When was the last time anyone had given her permission to move at her own pace? She dressed in the comfortable clothes from the closet, soft leggings and an oversized sweater that felt like armor and comfort combined, and cautiously opened the bedroom door. Liana stood in the hallway holding a tray with coffee, fruit, and what looked like homemade pastries. "Morning," Liana said with an easy smile. "Kale got back around 3 a.m. and immediately crashed. He'll probably surface around noon. How are you feeling?" "I don't know," Ralia admitted. Scared. Relieved. Guilty for feeling relieved. Like this isn't real. All perfectly normal. Liana handed her the tray. "Eat something, then come downstairs when you're ready. Kale wanted to talk to you about next steps, but again, no pressure, your timeline." After Liana left, Ralia ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The coffee helped ground her, the warmth spreading through her chest like courage she'd forgotten she possessed. She studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the faint bruise on her wrist already yellowing, the dark circles under her eyes from 3 years of poor sleep, the way she'd learned to make herself smaller. "You're safe now," she whispered to her reflection, testing the words. They felt foreign in her mouth. Downstairs, she found Liana in a spacious living room that overlooked the forest, morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything about this house felt open, breathable, the opposite of the suffocating elegance of Damien's carefully curated showpiece. "He's awake," Liana said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Fair warning, Kale's not a morning person, so if he's grumpy, it's the lack of sleep, not you." Ralia entered the kitchen and found the Alpha King making coffee in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, looking far more human than he had in his suit the night before. He glanced up when she entered, those silver eyes assessing her quickly. "You slept?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, thank you, for everything." The words felt inadequate for what he'd done, for what he'd risked. Kale poured 2 mugs of coffee, handed her one, and leaned against the counter. "We need to talk about what happens next. Your husband has been calling my office since 6 a.m., demanding to know where you are. His family is threatening political action, and we need to establish your legal protection before this escalates further." The clinical tone should have felt cold, but instead it steadied Ralia. This was manageable. This was a problem with solutions. "Can he force me to go back?" The question that had haunted her all morning. "No." Kale's voice carried absolute certainty. "I'm formally declaring you under my sanctuary protection. It's an old law, rarely invoked, but it essentially means you're under my direct authority now. He can't touch you, can't contact you, can't enter my territory to retrieve you. If he tries, it's a violation of Alpha King mandate." Ralia's coffee cup trembled in her hands. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. This is going to cause you political problems. I made a vow a long time ago." Kale's expression shifted, something raw showing through the ice for just a moment. "My mother was killed by my father when I was 12, beaten to death in their bedroom while I was at school. Everyone knew he hit her. No one did anything because werewolf law said mates were private business. Interference wasn't permitted." He set his mug down with deliberate care. "I found her when I got home. Called the authorities. Watched them arrest him while she was still warm. And I swore that day that if I ever had the power to stop it from happening to someone else, I would. No hesitation, no politics, just action." Ralia felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be free." Kale met her gaze directly. "That's what sanctuary means, Ralia. You're not beholden to him anymore. Not legally, not socially, not in any way that matters. You're under my protection until you're ready to stand on your own. And that timeline is yours to decide. What if I'm never ready?" The fear escaped before she could stop it. "Then you stay here as long as you need." Kale's voice softened. "I noticed your background when I looked you up last night. Fashion design degree. Worked for several prestigious houses before your marriage. There's a studio space in the West Wing, fully equipped, mostly unused. It's yours if you want it." Ralia stared at him. "You're giving me a design studio? I'm giving you space to be who you were before he took that from you." Kyle straightened. "Look. I know this is overwhelming. You've been in survival mode for 3 years, and suddenly you're being offered freedom you probably don't believe is real yet. That's okay. Take it one day at a time. But know this, you're not charity to me. You're someone I can help, and I have the power and resources to do it right. Let me." Before Ralia could respond, Liana appeared in the kitchen doorway. "We've got a situation." Damien Cross just arrived at the front gate demanding entry, every muscle in Ralia's body locked with terror. "He found me. He can't get through the gate," Kale said immediately, his voice shifting to pure command. "The property is under my direct authority. But we need to address this now before it escalates." He looked at Ralia. "You don't have to see him. You don't have to speak to him. But I need to make the sanctuary declaration official, and that means going on record in front of witnesses. Are you up for that?" Ralia thought about the 17 missed calls, the threatening messages, the way Damien's voice could make her feel 6 inches tall. She thought about 3 years of shrinking herself to survive, of losing her voice, of becoming a ghost in her own life. "Yes," she said, and her voice only shook a little. "I'm ready." Kale's expression shifted to something that might have been pride. "Liana, call Victor and tell him we need council witnesses. Official declaration, full recording." He turned back to Ralia. "You're about to make history. Sanctuary law hasn't been publicly invoked in 40 years. By tomorrow, every pack in the territory will know what your husband did and what you chose instead." "Good," Ralia said, finding strength she didn't know she still possessed. "Let them all know." An hour later, Ralia stood in Kale's formal office with Liana at her side and 3 council witnesses assembled via video conference. Through the window, she could see Damien pacing at the front gate, his charming mask completely gone, revealing the rage beneath. Kale stood beside his desk, every inch the Alpha King now, authority radiating from him like heat. This is a formal declaration of sanctuary protection under Alpha King authority, witnessed and recorded for council archives. Ralia Tran, formerly Ralia Cross, is hereby declared under my direct protection, effective immediately. One of the council witnesses, an elderly man with skeptical eyes, spoke up. Alpha King, this is highly irregular. The woman is legally bound in marriage. The woman is legally free, Kale interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. Werewolf law is clear. Mates who abuse forfeit all claims to partnership. I have medical documentation, witness statements, and photographic evidence of systematic abuse spanning 3 years. Damien Cross violated his bond the first time he raised a hand to her. Everything after that is void. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's fact, Kale gestured to Ralia. She's standing right here. Ask her yourself. All eyes turned to Ralia, and for a moment, fear threatened to steal her voice again. But then she remembered Liana's words. You're incredibly brave, and Kale's promise be free. He hit me, Ralia said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Repeatedly, for 3 years, he isolated me from my family and friends, controlled my money, monitored my phone, told me what to wear, and when to speak. He said if I ever tried to leave, he'd kill me. And I believed him, because I'd seen what he was capable of. The silence that followed was profound. The elderly council member's expression shifted. Child, why didn't you report this? Because I was terrified. Because he was charming and connected and no one would have believed me. Because the last time I tried to call my sister, he broke 2 of my ribs. Ralia felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. But I'm reporting it now. And I'm asking for sanctuary so I can rebuild my life without fear of him destroying me for daring to choose myself. Sanctuary is granted, Kale declared, his voice brooking no argument. Ralia Tran is under my protection. Damien Cross is hereby forbidden from contacting her, approaching her, or entering my territory. Violation will result in immediate arrest and prosecution under territorial law. He looked directly at the camera. Let the record reflect. This declaration is absolute. Any challenges will be brought before me personally. The council witnesses murmured their acknowledgement. And the video conference ended. In the sudden silence, Ralia felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This was real. This was official. She was actually, legally free. Through the window, she watched security approach Damien at the gate, watched him argue, saw his rage, saw the moment he realized he'd lost. He looked up at the house, and even from this distance, Ralia could feel his fury, but he couldn't reach her anymore. Kale moved to stand beside her at the window, not touching but present. He's going to fight this. His family will push back, try to use political pressure. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. I know, Ralia said softly. But I'd rather face his anger out here than his fists in there. You won't face it alone. Kale's promise settled over her like armor. That's what sanctuary means. You're pack now. Even if you're human. And we protect our own. Ralia watched Damien's car disappear down the mountain road, watched 3 years of nightmare fade into the distance. She knew this wasn't over, knew the hard work of healing was just beginning, knew Damien wouldn't give up easily. But for the first time in 3 years, she believed she might actually survive. And maybe, possibly, eventually learn to live again. 3 weeks passed like a dream Ralia kept expecting to wake from. 3 weeks of sleeping without fear, of eating when she was hungry instead of when permitted, of speaking without calculating whether her words would earn punishment. 3 weeks of slowly, cautiously remembering who she'd been before Damien had systematically erased her. The design studio became her sanctuary within a sanctuary. Kale had been right, it was fully equipped with everything she could need. From industrial sewing machines to a digital sketching tablet, to fabric samples organized by texture and weight, Ralia spent hours there, her hands remembering skills she'd thought lost, her creativity unfurling like a flower that had been pressed flat for too long. She was sketching a jacket design, something with structure and softness combined, armor disguised as elegance when Liana knocked on the studio doorframe. Hey, Victor just called. Damien's family filed a formal complaint with the council. claiming Kyle overstepped his authority with the sanctuary declaration. Liana's expression was careful, neutral. There's going to be a hearing in 2 weeks. Ralia's pencil stilled on the paper. Will I have to testify? Only if you want to. Kale's prepared to fight this without putting you in the spotlight. Liana moved into the studio, examining Ralia's sketches with genuine interest. But he also said if you want to speak, if you want to tell your story publicly, he'll support that too. Your choice. Everything here was her choice. The concept still felt foreign. Like wearing shoes 2 sizes too big. I don't know if I'm ready. Then don't be ready. You've got 2 weeks to decide. Liana picked up one of the sketches. A dress with strategic panels that suggested both vulnerability and strength. These are incredible, by the way. Have you thought about showing them to anyone? Who would want to see designs by Damien Cross's failed wife? The bitterness in Ralia's voice surprised even her. Who would want to see designs by Ralia Tran, one of the most talented designers to come out of the academy in the last decade? Liana countered. Because that's who you are. Not his wife. Not his victim, Ralia Tran, who had a feature in Vogue Wolves before she even graduated, who turned down 3 job offers from major houses because she wanted to start her own line. Ralia stared at her. How do you know all that? I do my research. Liana's smile was gentle. And I think it's time you remembered you're more than what he made you believe you were. The conversation stayed with Ralia for the rest of the day, circling through her mind like a song she couldn't quite forget. That evening, over dinner with Kale and Liana, meals that had become comfortable rituals rather than tense obligations, she found herself asking something she'd been afraid to voice. I want to go into town tomorrow, alone. Kyle paused mid-bite, his silver eyes assessing her. Any particular reason? There's a bookstore I used to love. Before, Ralia forced herself to meet his gaze. I want to see if it's still there. I want to do something normal without guards or protection or someone watching my every move. Damien knows you're here, Kale said carefully. He could be watching. I know. But I can't live in fear forever. If I never leave this house alone, he's still controlling me. Just from a distance. Ralia's voice grew stronger. I need to prove to myself that I can exist in the world again. Kale exchanged a glance with Liana, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but you take a panic button, and Liana stays in the area. Not hovering, just present. Deal? It was more than Ralia had expected. Deal. The next morning, she dressed carefully, jeans and a simple sweater, comfortable boots, nothing that screamed wealth or status. Just a woman going to a bookstore, normal, unremarkable, free. The town was a 20-minute drive down the mountain, nestled in a valley that somehow felt both intimate and expansive. Liana dropped her off a block from the bookstore with a gentle reminder about the panic button tucked in her pocket. I'll be at the coffee shop on the corner. You've got my number. You've got Kale's number. You're not alone even when you're alone, okay? Ralia nodded, surprised by how much Liana's presence steadied her. Over the past 3 weeks, the other woman had become more than just a guard or Kale's second-in-command. She'd become something Ralia hadn't had in years, a friend. The bookstore was exactly as she remembered, cramped and cozy, with narrow aisles that smelled of paper and possibility. Ralia lost herself in the stacks, running her fingers along spines, reading titles that promised escape and adventure and happy endings. She was reaching for a book on fashion history when a voice behind her made every muscle in her body freeze. Ralia. She didn't want to turn around, didn't want to see him. But 3 years of conditioning made her body betray her. She turned, and there was Damien, looking polished and perfect in designer casual wear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. We need to talk, he said, his voice carrying that reasonable tone that always preceded violence. No, we don't. Ralia's voice came out steadier than she expected, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. Don't be difficult. You've embarrassed me enough running to the Alpha King like some kind of helpless victim. Damien moved closer, and Ralia forced herself not to back away. This has gone on long enough. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it. Time to come home. I am home. The words surprised Ralia as much as they clearly surprised Damien. I'm not coming back to you. Not now. Not ever. His charming mask cracked, showing the rage beneath. You think you can just leave? You think he can protect you forever? You're my wife, Ralia. Mine. No. The word felt like power, like taking back every time she'd said yes when she meant no. every time she'd apologized for his crimes. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's but my own." Damien's hand shot out to grab her wrist, the same grip that had controlled her for 3 years, that had left bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and careful makeup. But this time, Ralia didn't flinch, didn't shrink, didn't disappear inside herself the way she'd learned to do. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent bookstore. "Ralia, we need to talk about this in private." "No, there's nothing private about what you did to me." Ralia's voice grew stronger, louder. Fed by 3 weeks of safety, and Kale's promise, and Liana's friendship, and her own rediscovered rage. "You hit me. You controlled me. You isolated me from everyone who loved me. You made me afraid to speak, to breathe, to exist. And you did it all behind closed doors where no one could see." Other customers were watching now, phones out, witnesses gathering. Damien's grip on her wrist tightened, and she saw the calculation in his eyes weighing his options, his reputation, the cost of making a scene. "Let go of her." The new voice was cold enough to frost the air. Kale stood in the bookstore entrance with Liana slightly behind him, both radiating the kind of authority that made Damien's hand fall away from Ralia's wrist immediately. "Alpha King." Damien's charm snapped back into place like a mask. "I was just talking to my wife. She's not your wife." Kale moved through the bookstore with predatory grace, positioning himself between Ralia and Damien. "Your marriage bond was dissolved 3 weeks ago when I granted her sanctuary. Or did you miss that part of the official declaration? That's still being contested by the council. Actually, it was upheld this morning." Victor appeared behind Kale, holding a tablet. "The council vote was unanimous. Sanctuary stands, marriage is void, and you, Damien Cross, are in violation of the protection order by approaching her." Ralia watched color drain from Damien's face. "That's not you can't." "I can. I did. It's done." Kale's voice carried absolute finality. "You crossed into my territory without permission to harass someone under my protection. That's grounds for immediate arrest and exile from Packlands. You're overreacting." "Am I?" Kale gestured to Ralia's wrist, where Damien's fingers had left fresh marks. "Because from where I'm standing, you just assaulted her in public, in front of witnesses, while under a protection order. That's not overreacting. That's enforcing the law you seem to think doesn't apply to you." Damien's mask finally shattered completely, revealing the rage Ralia knew so well. "She's mine. She married me, made vows. Vows you broke the first time you hit her." Kale's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this bookstore. You're going to return to your territory. And you're never going to contact, approach, or speak about Ralia Tran again. Because if you do, if I hear even a whisper that you violated this protection, I will personally ensure you're stripped of your family name and exiled permanently. Do you understand me?" The bookstore was silent except for the quiet sound of phones recording everything. Ralia watched it sink in for Damien, the witnesses, the recordings, the Alpha King's public declaration, his carefully constructed reputation crumbling in real time. "This isn't over," Damien said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Kale replied. "It is." Security appeared, Kale's personal guards, who escorted Damien from the bookstore while he protested and threatened and finally fell silent. Ralia stood frozen in the aisle, her heart pounding, her wrist throbbing where Damien had grabbed her. "You okay?" Liana asked softly, appearing at her side. "I told him no." Ralia's voice shook with adrenaline, and something else. Something that might have been pride. "I looked him in the eyes, and told him no." "You did?" Kale approached carefully, giving her space. "You stood your ground in front of witnesses. That took remarkable courage." "I was terrified," Ralia admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." Kale's expression softened. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry we weren't faster," Liana called the moment she saw him enter. "But you were fast enough." Ralia looked at the gathering crowd, at the phones still recording, at the evidence that would spread through social media within hours. "He can't hide anymore. Everyone saw what he really is." "Everyone saw what you really are too," Liana said. "Someone who refuses to be silenced." The bookstore owner approached tentatively. "Miss Tran, I just want you to know we've got your back. That footage goes straight to the council if you need it. And you're always welcome here, always." Other customers murmured agreement, offered support, shared their own stories in hushed voices. Ralia felt overwhelmed by the sudden solidarity. by people she didn't know choosing to believe her, to stand with her. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you, thank you." Later, back at Kale's house with ice on her wrist and tea warming her hands, Ralia finally let the full weight of what happened sink in. She'd stood up to Damien. In public, with witnesses. She'd told her truth without his permission to speak. "He's going to retaliate," she said quietly. "This will make everything worse. Let him try." Kale sat across from her, his silver eyes steady. "Every move he makes now is documented. Every threat is evidence. He's the one on trial now, not you. The council hearing in 2 weeks," Ralia started, "is going to be interesting." Victor entered the room with his ever-present tablet. "Because I've been doing some digging into Damien Cross's background. And you're not the first woman he's hurt. You're just the first one who got away." Ralia's teacup trembled in her hands. "What?" "2 previous relationships, both ending in suspicious circumstances. One woman moved overseas suddenly, won't talk about it. Another settled out of court for an undisclosed amount with a non-disclosure agreement." Victor's expression was grim. "And there are 3 other complaints filed and mysteriously withdrawn at his family's legal office. This is a pattern, not an isolated incident." "Oh God," Ralia felt sick. "Other women are going to be contacted by my investigators with offers of protection if they want to come forward," Kale interjected. "Damien doesn't get to keep hurting people just because he's wealthy and connected. That ends now." Ralia looked at Kale, this man who'd found her under a table and immediately mobilized his considerable power to protect her. Who'd given her sanctuary and space and support without asking for anything in return. Who'd turned what should have been a private escape into a public reckoning. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "It's more than just your vow. More than sanctuary law. Why do you care so much?" Kale was quiet for a long moment. "Because I couldn't save my mother. Because I was 12 years old and powerless, and I had to live with knowing she died alone and afraid while I was at school." His voice carried old pain. "But I'm not powerless anymore, and you're not alone. And maybe if I can help you, it balances the scales somehow, makes her death mean something." "It meant something," Ralia said softly. "It made you into someone who saves people like me." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, some recognition deeper than gratitude or obligation. Something that made Ralia's breath catch, and her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear. Liana cleared her throat deliberately. "Right. Well, I'm going to go. Anywhere else? You two need anything?" "We're good," Kale said, not looking away from Ralia. When they were alone, the silence felt charged with possibility. Ralia knew she wasn't ready, knew healing took time, knew jumping from one relationship to another was probably the worst idea possible. But she also knew that whatever was growing between them felt nothing like what she'd had with Damien. It felt like safety, like partnership, like the beginning of something that could be beautiful if she was brave enough to let it. "Thank you," she said finally. "For everything. For finding me. For protecting me. For seeing me. Always," Kale replied. And in that single word, Ralia heard a promise that extended far beyond sanctuary. She wasn't ready for it yet, but someday, maybe, she would be. And when that day came, she knew exactly where to find him. The video from the bookstore went viral within 24 hours. Ralia woke to find her phone flooded with messages, some supportive, some cruel, most from people she hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly eager to reconnect. She turned off her phone and tried to pretend the world outside Kale's sanctuary didn't exist. But the world had other plans. Victor appeared at breakfast 3 days later with his tablet, and an expression that managed to be both grim and triumphant. "We've got something. Multiple somethings. Actually." Kale set down his coffee. "Talk to me. Remember those 2 previous relationships I mentioned?" "One of the women agreed to meet with our investigator. Her name is Sienna Tran." Ralia's fork clattered against her plate. "That's my sister's name." "I know." Victor's voice gentled. "Damien dated your sister 5 years ago, before he met you. She broke it off after 3 months when he got violent, moved across the country to get away from him. She's been too afraid to contact you because he threatened her family, meaning you, if she ever spoke about what happened." The room tilted sideways. "He dated my sister? And then married me? It gets worse." Victor pulled up documents on his tablet. "I found police reports from 7 years ago, assault charges filed by another woman named Melissa Reeves. The charges were dropped after Damien's family paid for her medical bills and gave her a substantial settlement with an NDA attached." "Medical bills?" Liana's voice was sharp. "How bad?" fractured jaw, broken ribs, concussion. She was hospitalized for 4 days. Victor scrolled through more files. And there's another woman, Natalie Pierce, who filed a restraining order 3 years before that. It was mysteriously dismissed by a judge who happens to be a close friend of the Cross family. Ralia felt like she was drowning. He's done this before, multiple times, and his family just covered it up? Systematically. Victor's expression hardened. I've got documentation of payments, legal maneuvering, intimidation tactics. The Cross family has been enabling Damien's violence for at least a decade, possibly longer. They built him a reputation as a charming philanthropist while burying evidence that he's a serial abuser. Cale's jaw tightened with barely contained rage. We need to contact these women. Offer them protection, legal support, whatever they need to come forward. Already done. My investigator reached out this morning with offers of sanctuary if they want it. Victor looked at Ralia. Your sister wants to see you. She's terrified, but she wants to talk. Says she's been trying to find a way to reach you for 3 years, but Damien always seemed to know when she got close. He monitored my phone, Ralia whispered. My email. Everything. If she tried to contact me, he would have known. Which is why she stopped trying. She thought she was protecting you by staying away. She blames herself for not fighting harder to stay connected, for not warning you before you married him. Ralia's vision blurred with tears. Sienna, her baby sister, brilliant and fierce and protective. The sister she'd lost contact with gradually, naturally. Or so Damien had made it seem. Weekend plans that fell through. Phone calls that went unanswered. Distance that grew until they were strangers, except it hadn't been natural at all. It had been orchestrated. I want to see her, Ralia said. Please. I need to see my sister. Cale didn't hesitate. Victor, arrange it. Here, on our terms, with full security. Today, if possible. Already on it. Victor was typing rapidly. She can be here by this afternoon. The hours until Sienna's arrival felt eternal. Ralia paced the house, unable to sit still, unable to focus on anything except the fact that her sister, her baby sister, had been hurt by the same man who'd hurt her, and she'd had no idea. When the car finally pulled up, Ralia was at the door before Liana could stop her. And then Sienna was there. Older but unmistakably her sister. With the same dark eyes and the same stubborn set to her jaw, they stared at each other for a frozen moment before Sienna broke. I'm so sorry, her sister sobbed. I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you not to marry him. But you were so happy, and I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe he'd changed. Stop. Ralia pulled her sister into a fierce embrace. Stop apologizing. You have nothing to apologize for. He did this. He hurt you. He isolated me. This is all him. They clung to each other in the doorway. 3 years of forced separation crashing over them both. Finally, Liana gently guided them inside, giving them privacy in the living room while she and Cale maintained a respectful distance. Tell me, Ralia said when they'd both cried themselves out. Tell me everything. Sienna's story poured out how charming Damien had been at first, how quickly the charm had turned to control, how the first time he'd shoved her against a wall she'd known she had to leave, how when she'd tried to break up with him, he'd threatened to hurt her family, how she'd moved to Seattle and changed her number and tried to disappear. And then I heard you were dating him, Sienna whispered. 2 years later, you were engaged. I tried to call you, tried to tell you, but he always seemed to answer your phone. Said you were busy. Said you'd call me back. You never did. Because I never got the messages, Ralia realized with sick certainty. He deleted them all, made it seem like you'd just drifted away. When you got married, I came to the wedding. Do you remember? I tried to talk to you alone, but he was always there. Always between us. Sienna's hands trembled, and then after the wedding, when I tried to visit, he told me you didn't want to see me, said you were starting your new life and didn't need reminders of your old one. I believed him because you never returned my calls. Oh, Sienna. Ralia felt like something was breaking and healing simultaneously inside her chest. I thought you abandoned me. Thought you didn't approve of my marriage and decided to cut me off. He made us both think we'd abandoned each other. Sienna's voice cracked. That's what he does. He isolates people until they have no one left but him. They talked for hours. piecing together the manipulation, the systematic isolation, the way Damien had surgically removed everyone who might have helped Ralia escape. Parents who lived overseas and only knew what Damien told them. Friends who'd been turned away at the door with excuses about Ralia being tired or sick or busy. A sister who'd tried and tried until trying seemed like harassment. "I'm testifying at the council hearing," Sienna said suddenly, fiercely. "I want everyone to know what he did. To both of us. To all of us." "It's going to be hard," Ralia warned. "They'll question everything, try to discredit you. Let them try." Sienna's expression was pure steel. "I've been silent for 5 years. I'm done being silent." That evening, Victor called an emergency meeting. Along with Sienna's testimony, 2 other women had agreed to come forward, Melissa Reeves and a woman named Lauren Hayes who dated Damien in college and had stories that made Ralia's blood run cold. "We've got a pattern spanning 12 years, Victor explained, spreading documents across the conference table. 5 women, consistent behaviors, escalating violence. And we've got evidence that the Cross family knew about all of it and actively worked to cover it up." "This goes beyond Damien," Cale said quietly. "This is systemic enablement. The family's complicit. Which is why I've contacted the council directly." Victor pulled up an email. "I've requested the hearing be expanded to include an investigation into the Cross family's interference with justice. If we can prove they've been burying assault cases for over a decade, we can strip them of their political influence." Ralia stared at the documents, police reports, medical records, settlement agreements, threatening letters from Cross family lawyers. This was bigger than her escape. This was about stopping Damien from ever hurting anyone again. "I want to testify," she said. "At the hearing. I want to tell my story. And I want everyone to hear it." Cale looked at her carefully. "You don't have to. We have enough evidence. I know I don't have to. But I want to." Ralia's voice grew stronger. "Other women need to see that they can speak up. That they can survive. That there's life after escape. If I don't testify, I'm still letting fear control me." "Then we prepare," Cale said. "We build an airtight case. And we make sure the council has no choice but to see the truth." "Okay, but can we talk about how Damien literally dated the sister first, got violent, and then married Ralia? The audacity. The sociopathy. If you're sitting there screaming at your screen like I am, hit that like button. And Ralia deciding to testify? Queen behavior. Absolute queen behavior. Subscribe, because the council hearing is about to be everything. Justice is coming, and I need you all there with me to watch it happen. Don't miss it. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings stretched upward into darkness, while tiered seating surrounded a central floor, where witnesses stood exposed under harsh lighting. Ralia had been here once before, years ago, for a ceremonial event. Then, it had seemed grand. Now, it felt like a gladiatorial arena. She stood in the preparation room with Cale, Liana, and Victor, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. Through the walls, she could hear the murmur of the gathering crowd. This hearing had drawn more attention than anyone anticipated. Media, pack representatives, curious wolves eager to witness either justice or scandal. "You can still change your mind," Cale said quietly. "We have enough evidence without your testimony." "I know." Ralia smoothed down her dress, something she'd designed herself in those weeks of healing. Structured and elegant with clean lines that made her feel armored. "But I need to do this. For me, for the woman I used to be, and the woman I'm becoming." Sienna appeared in the doorway, looking nervous but determined. Behind her were Melissa and Lauren, the other survivors who'd agreed to testify. They'd met the night before, shared stories over tea in Cale's living room, woven their individual traumas into a tapestry of truth that was impossible to deny. "Ready?" Sienna asked, taking Ralia's hand. "No," Ralia admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." The council chamber fell silent when they entered. Ralia felt hundreds of eyes tracking her movement as she took her place at the witness stand. The council sat in their elevated positions, 7 elders who held the power to shape werewolf law. She recognized Elder Nathaniel, who'd questioned the sanctuary declaration. Elder Sophia, who'd supported her. 5 others whose expressions gave nothing away. And there, in the defendant's section with his family's expensive lawyers arrayed around him like armor, sat Damien. He looked polished and confident, every inch the successful businessman being unfairly accused. When their eyes met, he smiled that charming smile that had once made her feel special and now made her feel sick. But Ralia didn't look away, didn't shrink. She held his gaze until his smile faltered, then turned her attention to the council. Elder Nathaniel spoke first. Miss Tran, you've made serious accusations against Damien Cross and his family. The council takes such claims seriously, but we must also consider that marriage disputes often have two sides. The implication was clear. They thought this might be exaggeration, vindictiveness, a woman scorned, seeking revenge. Then let me be very clear, Ralia said, her voice steady. This isn't a marriage dispute. This is a pattern of systematic abuse that began on our honeymoon and continued for 3 years. Damien Cross is a violent man who his family has enabled and protected for over a decade. And I'm not the only one who can testify to that. She told her story then, every detail she'd been too afraid to voice. The first time he'd hit her a slap that he'd immediately apologized for, blamed on stress, promised would never happen again, how it had happened again and again. How the violence had escalated from slaps to punches to being choked until she nearly passed out. How he'd monitored her phone, controlled her money, isolated her from everyone who might help. How he'd threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave. The council chamber was utterly silent. Elder Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably. These are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Medical records from 3 emergency room visits where I claimed to have fallen or walked into doors, Victor said, standing from the advocates section. Photographic evidence of bruises, broken bones, and other injuries. Testimony from doctors who noted their suspicions but couldn't act without the patient's cooperation. And most damning testimony from 4 other women who experienced identical patterns of violence from the same man. He projected images onto the chamber's screens, medical reports, photographs that made several council members flinch, documented evidence that was impossible to deny. Ralia watched Damien's confident expression crack slightly. Miss Tran, Elder Sophia's voice was gentle. Why didn't you report this to authorities? Why wait 3 years? It was the question Ralia had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Because I was terrified. Because every time I thought about leaving, he'd hurt me worse. Because he told me no one would believe me he was charming, successful, respected. I was just his wife who should be grateful for the life he'd given me. Her voice broke slightly. And because the one time I tried to call my sister for help, he broke 2 of my ribs and told me if I ever tried to reach out again, he'd kill her too. So I stopped trying. I stopped hoping. I just tried to survive each day. That's not Damien started to speak, but his lawyer grabbed his arm. You'll have your chance to respond, Elder Nathaniel said sharply. Miss Tran, continue. Ralia took a breath. But surviving isn't living. And eventually, I realized I'd rather die trying to escape than spend one more day in that house. So when the opportunity presented itself at the Convergence, I took it. I hid under a table like a frightened animal because that's what he'd reduced me to. And the Alpha King found me and offered me sanctuary. Offered me safety. Offered me the chance to remember I was human, not property. She looked at Kale then, sitting in the advocates section, and drew strength from his steady presence. That's why I'm here. Not for revenge. Not because I'm vindictive or lying or exaggerating. I'm here because Damien Cross hurt me repeatedly for 3 years, and his family covered it up. And if I don't speak up, he's going to do it to someone else. Maybe he already is. We'd like to call our first supporting witness, Victor said. Sienna Tran. Ralia's sister took the stand, her hands shaking but her voice clear. She told her story how Damien had dated her first, how the violence had started, how she'd escaped and tried to warn Ralia but been systematically prevented from making contact. He threatened your family? Elder Sophia asked. Specifically? He said if I ever told anyone what happened, he'd make sure my sister paid for it. Sienna's voice cracked. So I stayed silent. I moved across the country, and I've had to live with the knowledge that my silence might have prevented Ralia from seeing the warning signs. You were protecting her, Ralia said from her seat. You were protecting me. Melissa Reeves testified next, describing her hospitalization and the settlement that came with an NDA. Lauren Hayes followed, her college-era experiences revealing that Damien's violence went back even further than anyone had realized. By the time all 4 women had spoken, the council chamber felt heavy with truth. Even Elder Nathaniel's skeptical expression had shifted to something grimmer. Mr. Cross, Elder Nathaniel finally said, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Damien stood, his lawyers whispering urgently in his ear. These women are. They're confused. Exaggerating. Relationships ended badly. And now they're trying to destroy my reputation. 4 separate women, Elder Sophia interrupted. With documented medical records, police reports, and consistent patterns of behavior, you're suggesting they're all lying? I'm suggesting they're bitter. I'm suggesting you're a liar, Ralia said, standing. You hit me. You choked me. You broke my bones and my spirit and tried to erase who I was. And now you're going to stand there and pretend you're the victim? Damien's mask finally shattered completely. You're my wife! You made vows, which you broke the first time you raised a hand to me. Ralia's voice rang through the chamber. I'm not your wife. I'm not your property. I'm a survivor who's taking back her voice. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Elder Nathaniel called for order, his expression showing he'd already reached a verdict even if it hadn't been officially declared. We'll hear evidence regarding the Cross family's role in covering up these incidents, he announced. Victor Ashford, present your case. What followed was a devastating presentation documents showing payments to victims, legal maneuvering to bury complaints, communications between Cross family lawyers discussing damage control. Most damning was an email from Damien's father, explicitly instructing their legal team to make the Reeves girl disappear in the wake of Melissa's hospitalization. By the time Victor finished, the council looked ready to render judgment without deliberation. This is absurd, Damien's father shouted from the gallery. You can't possibly believe. We believe the evidence, Elder Sophia said coldly, which is overwhelming and damning. This council finds Damien Cross guilty of systematic abuse, spanning over a decade. Furthermore, we find the Cross family guilty of criminal conspiracy in covering up said abuse. Elder Nathaniel took over. Damien Cross, you are hereby stripped of all pack affiliations and exiled permanently from werewolf territories. The Cross family will face additional sanctions, including loss of council representation and investigation into all previous legal cases they've been involved in. You can't do this! Damien lunged toward the council, but security intervened immediately. She's lying! They're all lying! Get him out, Elder Nathaniel ordered. As Damien was dragged from the chamber, still protesting, the elder turned to Ralia. Miss Tran, on behalf of this council, I apologize. The system failed you, and every woman who came before you. We will do better. Ralia felt Sienna's hand slip into hers, felt the presence of the other survivors standing beside her. They'd done it. They'd spoken their truth, and they'd been believed. Thank you, she said simply. But the real work starts now, making sure this never happens to anyone else. Elder Sophia smiled. Then I look forward to working with you on sanctuary law reform. Because something tells me you're going to change our entire legal system. Outside the council chamber, media swarmed with questions. Kyle materialized at Ralia's side, his presence parting the crowd like a shield. But before they could escape to the car, one reporter pushed through. Miss Tran, how does it feel to have taken down one of the most powerful families in werewolf society? Ralia paused, turned to face the cameras, and spoke her final truth. I didn't take them down. I told the truth. They destroyed themselves by choosing to protect an abuser instead of his victims. And that's on them, not me. In the car on the way back to Kale's sanctuary, Ralia finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Justice, validation, the official end of a nightmare that had defined 3 years of her life. You were incredible, Kale said softly. The council chamber won't forget this day. Good, Ralia replied. Because neither will I. 2 weeks after the council hearing, Ralia was beginning to believe in peace. The media frenzy had died down to a manageable hum. Damien had been escorted to the territory borders and forbidden from returning. His family, stripped of their political influence, had retreated into damage control. And Ralia was designing again. She sat in her studio late into the evening, sketching a collection she was calling armor clothes that made women feel powerful and protected without sacrificing elegance. Each piece told a story of survival, of strength found in unexpected places, of beauty that didn't require vulnerability. The house was quiet. Kale had meetings in the capital, Liana was visiting family, and for the first time in weeks, Ralia was completely alone. She should have felt vulnerable. Instead, she felt free. The security alarm's quiet chime barely registered, probably Kale returning early. Ralia continued sketching, losing herself in the flow of creating something beautiful from painful experience. Then she heard footsteps. Wrong footsteps. Too quick, too aggressive, moving with purpose through the house toward her studio. Ralia's pencil froze mid-stroke. The panic button was in her pocket, but her hands had gone numb with sudden, primal fear. She knew those footsteps, had learned to recognize them over 3 years, had developed an instinct for reading his moods and the pattern of his walk. Damien appeared in the studio doorway, and he looked nothing like the polished businessman who'd charmed his way through society. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his eyes carrying a wildness that made Ralia's stomach drop. This was Damien unmasked. Damien with nothing left to lose. Damien at his most dangerous. "Did you really think I'd just leave?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "Let you destroy everything I built?" Ralia's hand moved slowly toward her pocket. "How did you get past security?" "I've been planning this for 2 weeks. Watching the patterns, finding the gaps." Damien moved into the studio, blocking the exit. Everyone got careless, thought the exiled monster would just slink away and accept his punishment. "But you took everything from me, Ralia. My reputation, my family's standing, my entire life. So I'm taking something back. You took those things from yourself." Ralia forced her voice steady, even as her heart threatened to break through her ribs. "You did this. Every bit of it. Because of you." Damien's control cracked. "You were supposed to be perfect. Supposed to be grateful. I gave you everything. You gave me bruises and terror and 3 years of dying slowly." Ralia stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "You didn't give me anything but pain." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist, that same grip that had controlled her for so long. But this time, something was different. This time, Ralia had spent weeks remembering who she'd been before him, had testified in front of the council, had stood up to him publicly, had found strength in survivors who'd shared their stories. This time, she fought back. Ralia twisted her wrist in the defensive move Liana had taught her, breaking his grip. When Damien lunged forward, she grabbed the heavy measuring ruler from her desk and swung it at his face. It connected with his jaw, and he staggered back, shock replacing rage for a split second. "You're destroying me!" he roared, recovering. "No." Ralia backed toward her desk, fingers finally finding the panic button in her pocket. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just refusing to let you destroy me too." She pressed the button as Damien rushed forward. They collided into her desk, sketches scattering, pencils rolling across the floor. His hands found her throat familiar, terrible. The nightmare she'd escaped, now returned in physical form. But Ralia remembered Liana's other lessons. She brought her knee up hard, made contact, heard Damien's grunt of pain as his grip loosened. She shoved him away, gasping for air, scrambling to put distance between them. "The Alpha King can't protect you forever," Damien snarled, advancing again. "Eventually you'll be alone. And I'll be there." "She's not alone now." Kale's voice cut through the chaos like ice water. He stood in the studio doorway with Liana and 3 pack enforcers, his silver eyes blazing with fury that was somehow colder and more terrifying than Damien's rage. He took in the scene: Ralia's torn collar, the red marks on her throat, Damien's presence in his home. "You violated territorial law," Kale said, each word precisely controlled. "You crossed pack boundaries without permission. You broke into my home. You assaulted someone under my protection." He moved forward, and even Damien had enough sense to back away. "You've committed crimes that warrant immediate execution under werewolf law." "She's my wife," Damien started. "She was never your wife. She was your victim." Kyle positioned himself between Damien and Ralia, a living barrier. "And you just made the biggest mistake of your life by coming here." The enforcers moved in, restraining Damien despite his struggles. He fought, screamed threats and accusations, but his power was gone. He was just a man now, stripped of status and influence, facing consequences he'd avoided for too long. "What happens to him?" Ralia asked, her voice raw from where Damien's hands had pressed against her throat. "Trial for territorial violation, breaking and entering, assault." Kale's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly when he reached toward Ralia. "May I?" He gestured to her throat, and she nodded. His fingers were gentle as he examined the marks, his jaw tightening with each breath. "He hurt you again." "But I fought back." Ralia's voice grew stronger. "I didn't freeze. I didn't submit. I fought, and I survived." Kale's expression shifted to something that might have been pride mixed with rage. "You did. You absolutely did." He turned to Liana. "Get medical here now. And call Victor. I want maximum charges filed. Every single law he broke tonight. Documented and prosecuted. As the enforcers dragged Damien toward the door, he looked back at Ralia one final time. This isn't over. Yes, Ralia interrupted, her voice carrying absolute finality. It is. You don't control me anymore. You don't scare me anymore. You're just a sad, violent man who's going to spend the rest of his life paying for what you did. And I'm going to spend the rest of mine being free. Damien's last expression was pure disbelief, as if he still couldn't comprehend that she'd actually escaped him. Then he was gone, removed from Cale's territory and restraints, heading toward a cell that would hold him until his trial. The studio fell silent except for Ralia's ragged breathing. Cale remained close but not touching, giving her space to process. Liana appeared with a medical kit, her expression fierce and protective. I'm okay, Ralia said, though her hands trembled. Throat's sore, but I'm okay. You're not okay, Cale said gently. And that's okay. He violated your safe space, tried to hurt you again. You're allowed to not be okay. Ralia looked around her studio, her sanctuary within a sanctuary, now tainted by violence. Sketches scattered across the floor, her chair overturned, the physical evidence of the violation. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, felt the unfairness of it all. I thought I was done being afraid of him, she whispered. You are. Cale's voice carried certainty. Because fear and caution are different things. You pressed the panic button. You fought back. You survived. That's not fear controlling you, that's you controlling the situation despite fear. Liana cleaned and bandaged the marks on Ralia's throat with gentle efficiency. He's going to prison, Ralia. Real prison. Not just exile. Territorial violation carries a minimum 10-year sentence, and that's before we add the assault charges. Good, Ralia said fiercely. He doesn't get to hurt anyone else. Not ever again. Later, after medical had cleared her, after statements had been given and evidence collected, Ralia found herself on Cale's back porch where they'd shared countless evening conversations over the past months. The moon hung heavy in the sky, and the forest beyond seemed peaceful, untouched by human violence. Kyle sat beside her, maintaining careful distance as always. But tonight, that distance felt different. Tonight, Ralia was hyper-aware of his presence, the strength that had protected her, the gentleness that had healed her, the patience that had given her time to recover at her own pace. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming back when you did. For the security system that worked. For everything. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Cale's voice was soft. But you're welcome anyway. They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. Then Ralia asked something she'd been wondering for weeks. What happens now, after the trial, after everything settles? Do I stay here forever? You stay as long as you want. Cale turned to face her. This is your home now. If you choose it to be. No obligations, no expectations. Just home. Ralia looked at him, really looked at him. The Ice King everyone feared, who'd shown her nothing but warmth. The powerful alpha who'd used his strength to protect rather than dominate. The man who'd given her space to heal, and time to remember who she was. Cale, she said slowly. What if I want to know what it feels like to be touched without fear? He went very still. Ralia, I know I'm still healing. I know it hasn't been that long. She turned to face him fully. But I also know that every time you're near me, I feel safe. And maybe I'm ready to feel something more than just safe. I don't want to rush you. Cale's voice was rough with restraint. I don't want you to confuse gratitude with... This isn't gratitude. Ralia reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. Her fingers brushed his hand, and she felt the slight tremor that ran through him at the contact. This is me recognizing that somewhere between hiding under that table and standing in the council chamber, I started falling for you, and I'm terrified because the last time I trusted someone, he destroyed me, but I'm also brave enough now to take the risk. Cale's hand turned, palm up, mirroring that first moment when he'd offered her a choice beneath the banquet table. Tell me if this is too much, he said softly. Tell me if you need me to stop. Tell me anything, and I'll listen. Ralia placed her hand in his, felt his fingers close around hers with heartbreaking gentleness. Kiss me, she whispered. Please. I want to know what it feels like when it's a choice, not an obligation. Cale leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips finally touched hers, it was nothing like the demanding kisses Damien had taken. This was soft, questioning, a conversation rather than a conquest. Ralia felt tears slide down her cheeks as she realized the truth. Being touched could be gentle. Being wanted didn't have to mean being owned. When they pulled apart, Kale brushed away her tears with his thumb. "You're crying. Because it doesn't hurt," Ralia said, wonder in her voice. "Being close to you, it doesn't hurt. It never will." Kale's voice carried the weight of a vow. "I promise you that. Not ever." They sat together under the moonlight, fingers intertwined, and Ralia felt something shift in her chest. Damien had tried to break her tonight, one final attempt to reclaim the power he'd lost. But she'd fought back, survived, and was now sitting here, choosing connection over isolation, trust over fear, love over survival. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and that made all the difference. Suspenseful CTA #4. "Y'all, I'm not okay. That man broke into the sanctuary and Ralia had to fight for her life? But did you see her? Did you see how she fought back? How she pressed that panic button and refused to be a victim again? That's growth. That's healing. And then that kiss? It doesn't hurt, I'm crying real tears right now. If you're emotionally destroyed in the best way possible, hit that like button. Subscribe because the epilogue is next and we're about to see Ralia thriving. I need you all there with me to witness her happily ever after. Don't you dare miss it. 2 years later, Ralia Tran stood in her design studio, not the one in Kale's house, but the converted warehouse in the city that bore her name in elegant letters across the entrance. Ralia Tran. Armor and elegance. Sunlight streamed through industrial windows, illuminating rows of clothing that told stories with every stitch. She ran her hand over a jacket she'd just completed, structured shoulders that suggested strength, soft lining that promised comfort, hidden pockets where someone could keep a panic button or pepper spray or just their keys, armor disguised as fashion, protection wrapped in beauty. "You've got a visitor," her assistant called from the front. "Should I send them back?" "Please," Ralia replied, setting down her sketching pencil. She was 8 months pregnant now, her belly making certain design tasks challenging but not impossible. She'd learned that pregnancy didn't mean helpless, just as surviving didn't mean broken. Elena Voss appeared in the doorway, her former best friend who'd reconnected with her after the council hearing, who'd cried and apologized for not fighting harder to stay in Ralia's life during her marriage. They'd rebuilt their friendship slowly, carefully, brick by brick. "I brought the final numbers for the foundation launch," Elena said, setting down a tablet. "We've got 15 safe houses established across 3 territories, legal aid partnerships with 20 law firms, and therapy programs in place for survivors and their families." Ralia looked at the numbers with satisfaction. The Sanctuary Foundation, funded by her increasingly successful design business and supported by Kale's considerable resources, had become her life's work. She'd taken her pain and transformed it into protection for others. "And the council vote?" Ralia asked. "Passed unanimously. Elder Sophia personally championed it." Elena's smile was brilliant. "The Ralia Tran Sanctuary Law is now official werewolf legal code. Any abuse victim can claim sanctuary. No questions asked. No political maneuvering allowed. You changed the entire system." Ralia felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. Proud tears. "We changed it. All of us." The studio door opened again, and Kale entered carrying takeout bags and wearing an expression of exaggerated concern. "You were supposed to take a break an hour ago," the doctor said. "The doctor said I'm healthy and the baby's fine and I can work as long as I'm comfortable." Ralia walked to him, accepting his kiss of greeting with the ease of 2 years together. "But I'll eat if you stop hovering." "I don't hover. I express reasonable concern for my pregnant mate who works too hard." Kale set the food on her design table, then paused. "Although, point taken, I'm hovering." Elena laughed. "I'll leave you two alone." "Ralia, the gala is Saturday, you're still planning to attend?" "Wouldn't miss it." Ralia glanced at Kale. "It's the Foundation's official launch party. Half the werewolf elite will be there, seeing exactly what their donations built." After Elena left, Ralia and Kale settled into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over 2 years of partnership. He unpacked food while she moved sketches, creating space for an impromptu lunch in her studio. It was mundane and perfect, nothing like the carefully choreographed performances Damien had demanded. "Sienna called," Kale said between bites. "She and the kids are flying in for the gala." "Your parents too," Ralia smiled. Her family, fractured and scattered by Damien's manipulation, had slowly reconnected over the past 2 years. Her parents had returned from overseas, horrified to learn what their son-in-law had hidden from them. Sienna had moved closer, was rebuilding her life with the help of therapy and time. They were healing together, learning to be a family again. "How's the trial prep going?" Ralia asked carefully. Damien's criminal trial was finally happening next month, delayed by legal maneuvering but inevitable. Victor says it's airtight. Territorial violation, breaking and entering, assault, violation of exile. He's looking at 25 years minimum. Cale's voice was neutral, but his eyes carried satisfaction. He'll be an old man when he gets out, if he survives prison. Ralia touched her belly, feeling their daughter kick. "I don't want her to grow up knowing her mother was defined by victimhood. I want her to know I was a survivor who became a protector. She'll know." Cale covered her hand with his. "She'll grow up watching you run a fashion empire and a foundation that saves lives. She'll see you advocate for legal reform and support other survivors. She'll know her mother is a force of nature. And her father is an alpha king who's softer than anyone suspects." Cale smiled, the genuine smile he saved for private moments, so different from the cold mask he showed the world. "Only with you. And only when you're not looking." They finished lunch surrounded by Ralia's designs, talking about nursery colors and baby names and the gala's seating arrangements. Normal conversations. Boring conversations. The kind of everyday intimacy Ralia had once thought was impossible for her. Saturday evening arrived with the glitter and ceremony that werewolf society demanded. The gala was held in the grand hall where Ralia had once crawled under a table to escape. Cale had insisted on the venue, transforming the space where her nightmare began into the place where her triumph was celebrated. Ralia wore one of her own designs, a gown that accommodated her pregnant belly while making her feel powerful and beautiful. Cale stood beside her in formal wear, every inch the alpha king, his hand warm at the small of her back. The who's who of werewolf society had turned out. Elder Sophia gave a speech about legal reform. Victor presented statistics on the Foundation's impact. Melissa, Lauren, and other survivors shared their stories of healing. And finally, Ralia took the stage. "2 years ago, I hid under a table in this very room," she began, her voice carrying through the hall. "I was terrified, broken, convinced I had no value beyond what my abuser said I had. But someone found me in that darkness and offered me a choice. Stay trapped, or take a hand extended in help." She looked at Cale in the crowd. "I took the hand. And that choice led to everything that came after escape. Healing, justice, purpose. But the most important thing I learned is that healing isn't passive. It's not something that happens to you. It's something you choose, every single day." Ralia touched her belly. "I'm about to become a mother, and I want my daughter to grow up in a world where survivors are supported, where abuse is punished, where sanctuary is a right, not a privilege. That's why this foundation exists. That's why we're all here tonight." She looked out at the crowd, pack leaders and council members, fellow survivors and supporters, people who'd doubted and people who'd believed. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. Tonight, I'm standing here as a business owner, an advocate, a soon-to-be mother, and a person who chose to transform pain into purpose. If you take anything from tonight, take this. You are more than what was done to you. You are more than your worst day. And you deserve a second chapter that's better than your first." The applause was thunderous. Ralia felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. These were good tears, earned tears, the kind that came from standing in the light after living in darkness for so long. After the gala, after the crowds dispersed and the accolades faded, Ralia and Cale returned home to the sanctuary that had become their shared space, then their shared life. They sat on the porch where they'd first kissed, where Ralia had first chosen trust over fear. "Do you ever think about that night?" Cale asked. "When I found you under the table?" "Every day," Ralia admitted. "It's the moment my life split into before and after. Before, I was dying. After, I started living again." "You did the hard part," Cale said. "I just gave you safe space to heal." "You gave me more than space." Ralia took his hand, placed it on her belly so he could feel their daughter kick. "You gave me patience when I needed time. You gave me strength when I needed support. You gave me partnership when I was ready for love. You gave me proof that men could be gentle, that power could protect instead of destroy." Cale's eyes shone suspiciously bright. "You gave me proof that my mother's death wasn't meaningless, that I could honor her by protecting others, that the vow I made as a 12-year-old boy could actually change lives." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, feeling their daughter move beneath their palms. In the distance, the forest stretched wild and free. Somewhere in those trees, wolves ran under the moonlight. living according to their nature. And here on this porch, two people who'd found each other in the worst moment created something beautiful in the aftermath. "I love you," Ralia said, the words still feeling new even after 2 years. "Not because you saved me, but because you let me save myself while standing beside me." "I love you," Kale replied, "because you're the bravest person I've ever met, and because you took one of the worst things that can happen to someone and turned it into a force for good in the world." Their daughter kicked again, as if agreeing with both sentiments. Ralia laughed through her tears, feeling the full weight of everything she'd survived, and everything she'd become. The most desired lady in werewolf society, not because of her beauty or her family name or her fashion designs, though all of those mattered. No. She was desired, truly desired, because she'd taken her broken pieces and built something stronger, because she'd crawled out from under that table and refused to stay small, because she'd spoken the truth when silence was easier, because she'd fought for justice and won, because she'd loved again despite every reason to hide behind walls. "What are you thinking?" Kale asked softly. Ralia looked at the stars, at the forest, at the home they'd built together. She thought about the foundation that would help thousands of survivors, about the fashion empire that employed dozens and made women feel powerful, about the daughter who would grow up knowing her mother was strong, about the partner who chose her every day. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that crawling under that table was the scariest thing I ever did, but meeting you there was the luckiest. And everything that came after, every hard moment, every tear, every victory, it was all worth it to get here. To this porch, this moment, this life, I didn't think I deserved but fought for anyway." Kale pulled her close, careful of her belly, his embrace warm and safe and chosen. "Here's to second chapters," he murmured against her hair. "Here's to second chapters," Ralia echoed, "and to being brave enough to turn the page." Above them, the moon hung full and bright, lighting the world with silver promise. And beneath its glow, two people who'd found each other in darkness built a future written in light. The most desired lady in werewolf society had finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not someone to complete her, but the space to become complete within herself. Not rescue, but partnership. Not survival, but life. And that made all the difference. "I'm not crying. You're crying. Okay, fine. We're all crying." Ralia went from hiding under a table in fear to standing on a stage changing laws, from surviving abuse to building an empire and a foundation and a family, from broken to whole to thriving. If this story didn't hit you right in the feels, check your pulse, because you might be a robot. Drop a comment with your favorite moment. Mine is literally every single time she chose herself. And if you loved this journey from darkness to light, from victim to victor, from crawling under tables to ruling beside kings, show some love. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to know that healing is possible. And happily ever afters exist even after the worst chapters. Until next time, remember, you're never too broken to rebuild. And sometimes, the person who finds you in your darkest moment becomes the one who stands beside you in the light. Peace out, story lovers. You're amazing, and don't let anyone tell you differently.